Hello everybody, it's Katie, Alice, ASMR, and today I am going to attempt to do a softly spoken video, which I haven't done before, and I have a guest with me who is currently sleeping. Now I may have to edit this video, there could be some cuts, as I'm hoping he's going to be quiet, but my baby is asleep on my lap, so we'll see how this goes. But anyway, I am going to be discussing the Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. Now, I have had this book for a while. My mum read it and she said I would really like it. But I just didn't have the time to sit and read it. And then I have been given the wonderful opportunity to join the ASMR book club, which was started by the amazing Angel on My Shoulder. Is such a lovely lady, and I've watched her videos for a long time, and she just has the warmest, kindest energy. And when I saw there was a book club, I was very keen to join. And Jeannie B ASMR is also part of this book club, and she's another lovely, lovely woman who I have watched for a few years now, and I just feel very lucky to be associated with them in this way. We all love to read, and I think reading and books in general just connect people, and you end up meeting people or talking to people that you didn't think you would because of a shared love. So I think it's lovely. But I didn't read this when I first got it because I have a baby, so I don't really get much time. I'm having to tap with one hand because my other hand is supporting his body. But I am so glad that I suggested this book for the September book. I think they read 2 books the past 2 months, so check those out, and they are also going to be posting their reviews of this book today. Very excited to hear their thoughts on it, as it's a very sensitive topic, and it's something that you have to do right. I think if you're going to write a book about this time in history, you have to be very what's the word? I guess you just have to make sure you get all your information exactly how it happened, and because it's based on a true story. So I know that the author at the end of the book, she includes extra information on her experience with interviewing Lali, who is the main character in the story. She interviewed him to get all of this information, so it came right from the source. So you know that it's accurate to what happened to him. And it was truly heartbreaking, to say the least. I've taken some notes, as you can see, quite a lot. I just took notes as I was reading so that I didn't forget anything that was happening. and then I'm going to discuss what happens. So if you'd like to read it, please go and read it. I highly, highly recommend it. And then come back and watch the video. But if you want to know what happens, as I will be giving spoilers, then feel free to carry on watching. So, the back says, I tattooed a number on her arm. She tattooed her name on my heart. In 1942, Lali Sokolov arrived in Auschwitz, Birkenau. He was given the job of tattooing the prisoners marked for survival, scratching numbers into his fellow victims' arms in indelible ink to create what would become one of the most potent symbols of the Holocaust. Waiting in line to be tattooed, terrified and shaking, was a young girl. For Lali, a dandy, a Jack the Lad, a bit of a chancer, it was love at first sight, and he was determined not only to survive himself, but to ensure this woman Gita did too. So begins one of the most life-affirming, courageous, unforgettable and human stories of the Holocaust. The love story of the tattooist of Auschwitz. I didn't know it was a true story when I first saw the cover years ago when it came out. I just saw that and didn't read the back. I didn't know that this actually happened to someone. Knowing it's a true story as you're reading it, it just hits so much harder. Obviously everything that happened in Auschwitz during World War II is, you can't even comprehend what that was like for those people. And I think one of the main things that I realised was I never even, and it's awful, but I never even thought about people potentially falling in love in a place like that. And, you know, it makes sense because they're still human beings, even though they are completely stripped of who they are and degraded and everything. They are still themselves at heart. And reading a love story in a place full of death is one of the most uplifting things I have ever read in my life. And so I'll start from the beginning. And it begins on one of the trains, and the description of the trains, how they were shoulder to shoulder, just so cramped, and obviously they had to go to the bathroom, but there wasn't any bathrooms, so the train was just covered in urine, feces, and people would die. Fights would break out, or people would die from, starvation, and their bodies were just there for everyone to be around for the journey. The people who were taking them to Auschwitz didn't dispose of the bodies during the journey, they just had to live next to a dead body for that journey. And these journeys to the camps took weeks. I can't remember how long exactly they took, but a long time. So you can't even imagine being in those conditions for that long. And then when someone would die, sometimes they were robbed of the things that they had, because at this point, the people who were on these trains, they didn't know what they were going to, no one knew. They knew that they were going to be working, and they were, working camps. That was all they thought that they were. So they had to volunteer one male from each family to go, and Lali, he volunteered. But he thought he'd be working. He was a very charming man, and he had money and prized possessions that he probably thought he could use to, get better. sleeping arrangements, get better work, anything to kind of bribe the officers. And I think as much as he did end up doing that in his own way, I think he very quickly realised that they weren't there, just to work, and I don't think anyone could have prepared for what those camps turned into. And one of the quotes from this, they called the camps production lines of death, which I just picture a conveyor belt of people just going to die, and that's such a horrible image for, there were families, babies, elderly people just killed in these places eventually, and it's a part of history that everyone should learn about and research. I've definitely learned so much more than I thought I knew before. I did study it at school and I loved studying it, but reading books like this make these stories so much more raw and real, because you're hearing it from someone, like their personal first-hand experience, not just something that's written in a history book from like a third person point of view. So it was a very different experience for me reading this, and I'm so glad I did. I'm just gonna have a sip of my coffee quickly. God, that's strong. It's a very cold, rainy, windy day today. We had a big storm last night, so just trying to keep warm with the coffee. Okay. So I'm looking down here because my notes are down here. So I'm trying to think. So the story, once Lali arrives at the camp, I know that he becomes I don't even know how to say how they pronounce the name that he becomes. It's the German for tattooist, but I don't know how you say it. I can't remember, but there is already a tattooist there, and then I can't remember. Oh no, I cannot remember what happens to the old tattooist. But Lali takes over and is given this role, which comes with perks, as he is technically helping out the officers. He has a close relationship with an SS officer. Boretsky is the SS officer's name, who Lali ends up sort of developing. I'd say he's more of an acquaintance. They're not friends. He just wants to stay on his good side because he has these sudden bursts of anger which are quite frightening, and he acts out very aggressively, which is exactly how I imagined SS officers to be. For example, I think it's the first night in the camp, or one of the first nights, and some of the men go to the area which is the toilet, which is basically just holes in the ground on like a wooden plank, and I think there was a young boy, about 8 years old there, 7 or 8 years old, and they just get gunned down and killed randomly. All they're doing is using the toilet, and that's such an evil act. I think, I'm lost for words most of the time with this book. simply because of how these things actually happened. It makes me feel sick. But anyway, so Lali becomes the tattooist just so that he can get by. He does everything in this book he does just to survive, which I think many people did. And he doesn't want to harm anyone, but unfortunately, in order to live, he has to do what he has to do, and that's, it's horrible for him. But through doing this, he meets Gita, and the moment he sees her, he falls in love with her and becomes determined to know her, to know more about her, to talk to her. She's in a separate block, so he has to find ways of getting to her and finding out who she is. And I'm pretty sure before this he's never been in love, and coming to a place like this is where he meets the love of his life. That's just, it's so sad that that's where they had to meet and where their love story began, but it began in a place full of death, and she almost represents hope for him. Hope that they will get out, they will have a life, they're not going to let this stop them from being together. And Gita is more hesitant with that. I think she isn't so sure. She doesn't see a way out, but Lali does, and he just wants to protect her and look after her. So he ends up befriending construction workers who are building the gas chambers, but he doesn't know that they're gas chambers at this point. But he befriends these people so that they can bring him things from the outside into the camp. And when people die, their belongings are rifled through, and any diamond rings, gems, money, anything is taken from them. And I don't know exactly what they do with it, but the girls are going through that, and they are able to give it to Lali, who then uses all these jewels and things to get medicine, food, chocolate is a big one, into the camp so that he can share it around and they can live longer. There's one point Lali says, "Help the one, help the world." So basically, if you're kind to one person, then that has an impact on more people. So just by helping one person, you're helping so many more, and I think that's something to sort of live by. So for a big part of the book, it's just about survival. It shows Gita and Lali falling in love and kind of surrendering to these feelings, even in a place full of death. Lali truly believes that they will get out, they will survive this, and even though they are beaten and just stripped of everything that makes them who they are, the one thing that these people could never take from them was their soul and their heart. And it's just incredible that they had all this hope. And all the things that happened to these people, they were normal people. They did nothing wrong. They were targeted simply because of the families they were born into, because of their religion. And that is just pure evil. And it's like it could happen to anyone. It could have happened to just me or you, if we were born during a different time or in a different country. But I in the end, you know, Hitler became so greedy with power and destruction that it wasn't even about Jewish people anymore. It was any group that he felt weren't worthy of being alive. They were targeted as well, like gypsies, which I learned during this book when the gypsies arrived in camp, who Lali becomes very, very close with. And that part of the book where, you know, he becomes friends with, what was her name? Nadia. And I remember thinking, Nadia is hope for Lali as well, because she reminds him of his mother. And he develops a really lovely relationship with her, where they talk all night and get to know each other, and you know, they just tell stories which keep them alive, keep them going. And then in the book he asks her what her name means, and she says Hope, which just solidified what I thought. But when the gypsies, one day they are taken away and put on the back of a truck, all the children, all the men, women, everybody are put there, and Lali sees them go. And these were people he lived with throughout a big part of his time there and became really close with, and they're just taken away. And then there's a scene where, just after, where Lali, I can't remember what he's doing, but ash starts falling on him, and he knows that that's the where the people that he was friends with, that's their bodies being burnt, and it's falling on him, and the damage that would do to you for life is, I mean, how scarring that would be, how you get over that, I just don't know. Another huge part of this book that I really loved and didn't expect was the friendships between the women, so between Gita, Dana, Silka, I think that's how you say her name. Those friendships, you know, these women were united. They were very young as well when they first arrived in the camp, and they just lifted each other up, and I loved that, because in a place that was run by evil men, the female empowerment was so cool to read about. These girls didn't turn on each other, they embraced each other, they welcomed new girls in, and they got each other through the hardest times. Like when Gita found out that her mother was dead. I think her whole family was dead. Because her neighbour came into the camp, she told her that her family was dead. And she didn't cry, but the girls that she was friends with, they cried for her. And it's like they felt each other's pain, they felt each other's triumphs. They truly loved each other. And the part of it that Silka has to go through is horrific. Silka was forced to sleep with a high-ranking officer because she was considered beautiful, and she got to keep her hair, her long hair, unlike the other girls. And it says at the end of the story that she was I think she was put in prison for helping she was like seen as a like an accomplice, or I don't know what the word would be, but she was a prisoner after that because she was forced to sleep with an officer, which baffles me. And then she was put to hard labour in a camp, and I know there's the second follows on from this about Silka and shows her journey, which I'm really interested to read because I cannot understand why she had to go through that. My mum's reading that at the moment, so I'll see what she says. But yeah, the women were just, it was truly beautiful in a place full of death. They had so much life and love to give. It's remarkable. I wrote down here saying Lali is no longer comforted by the stars. They remind him of the life he should have, but doesn't. So in the beginning of the book, Lali would look at the stars and think of his family looking at the same stars, and he would hope that they were thinking of him and that they were okay. And then one day he looked at the stars and would think of the life he should be living instead, and wasn't. I think it got to a point where he just had enough of all the death. I think the turning point was when his friends, the gypsies, when they were taken away. I think that was when he just couldn't be there anymore, and he became very depressed. And he was determined to get out no matter what. And then towards the end of the book, the Russians invade, and the SS start to panic. They start destroying documents, and they just start killing most of the prisoners, to kind of erase everything that happened, because they realise that they're in trouble. And that's when Lali and Gita separated, and she's taken away, and he sees her taken away with the girls on a cart, but he doesn't know what happens to her. And everyone flees basically, and Lali gets to a point where he just walks out of the camp. Yeah, it's just crazy to me that, at one point Lali is completely trapped where he is, and if you make any, wrong moves in the camp, SS officers are there to just kill you instantly. And there's also a part of the camp where if you go there, you're beaten, and Lali saw some women who were completely naked, and a lot of them would just go up to an electric fence and kill themselves to avoid anything bad happening to them, which is just so sad. But to get to a point where he can suddenly just leave because everyone has abandoned the camp, because they know that basically Hitler's going to be either convicted or he's going to die because of what he did. So he leaves, and Gita goes off with the girls, and she's taken in by some really nice girls who they run away and get to a house where they are taken in and looked after by people. And Lali ends up meeting some Russians in somewhere, I can't remember where he goes, but he meets the Russians, and because Lali can speak lots of languages, they find a very good use for him, and he ends up working with very important men, and he has to go into the town and find girls for these men to enjoy. And he gives them gems and jewels and money to come and pleasure these men, which is awful and disgusting. But he ends up smuggling jewels and gems and money for himself, and over time he builds up enough and he leaves because he wants to find Gita, before living, he leaves to go back to Slovakia, and I remember when he gets to the train station and he's met by the station master, that's what he's called. He meets the station master, and there's a moment where I think he's going to go up and, hurt him, but he goes up to Lali and offers him half of a sandwich and his hot coffee because of what Lali's been through, because he sees the number on his arm. And it was the first time in the book where I realised that every time a stranger or someone would approach Lali or another character, I would assume something bad was going to happen because it had done the entire time. But then these people were so kind and generous, and I imagine that that's how the people who survived Auschwitz, how they lived their life afterwards for a while, constantly on edge, maybe fearful of people because of what they'd gone through, but really there are still kind people in the world, and people who are willing to help others still and see them as human beings. So it was just a nice moment in the story that I really liked. But Lali ends up waiting at the station for trains to see if Gita is on any of them, and he's also reunited with his sister. She's the only one that survived, but he didn't. Lali never found out what happened to his parents, but his brother got killed, and his sister survived, so that's so nice for him that he has his sister. And so they're reunited, and he goes searching for Gita because his sister encourages him to, and through so much perseverance and determination he finds her and they are reunited. And the odds of them finding each other, surviving the camp at all, but to then both leave the camp separately and find each other again is just so unlikely that it almost proves that they belong together. And I love that. Lali never lost hope. He never felt that it was impossible to find her. He always believed he would, and he had to find her. Living in a time now where people are so quick to give up on relationships and think the grass is always greener and stuff like that, to witness a love story that's so pure and true is just a lovely thing to read about, even in these circumstances. So anyway, by the end of it, they stayed together for the rest of their lives, and they had a son called Gary. Gary said their home was filled with love and food and affection. They were grateful for everything in their lives, and they knew what was truly important. So they just lived their lives how they should have always been allowed to live their lives. And I think because of what they'd been through, anything else that happened to them in life didn't matter, because they'd already been through the worst thing imaginable. So they were just so grateful for the life that they had. Now, I have a section of this which I've written to read a paragraph from a certain page, so I'm just going to find that page and read it to you. So the paragraph says, "The Tattooist of Auschwitz is a story of two ordinary people living in an extraordinary time, deprived not only of their freedom but their dignity, their names, and their identities. And it is Lali's account of what they needed to do to survive. Lali lived his life by the motto, 'If you wake up in the morning, it is a good day.' On the morning of his funeral, I woke knowing it was not a good day for me, but that it would have been for him. He he was now with Geeta. They died 3 years apart. He truly couldn't live his life without her once he met her. If that's not true love, I don't know what is. But I adored this book. I found it very difficult to read at times, but just so uplifting and hopeful in more of the book than, there was more love and hope than there was sadness. And I think that says a lot of the characters and how they never lost the spark that made them want to live, even in the face of death. So, I would highly recommend. And yeah, I've just sort of gone through the story. Just know that I think it's such a good book. Please read it. And if you have read it, let me know what you think as well. And I also want to say, if there are any ASMR artists who want to be a part of the book club, then let me know, or let Jeannie B ASMR know, or Angel on my shoulder know, because we'd love to have you. We love to talk about books, and if that's something you like to do, then join us. So yeah, just comment, let me know, and you could be picking the book for October. I hope this was enjoyable. I look forward to watching their reviews and hearing what they thought, and I also look forward to hearing what the next book is for next month. So thank you for watching.